Day 101 of making my game. With all 4 basic enemy types done, I finished the first phase of development. So today I'm planning what's next. First, I'll expand the combat system with combo counters, execution, throwing daggers, and a temporary immunity ability. Then healing, both in combat and slowly outside of it. Next up, I'll add a UI system to show health abilities, then a skill tree with all the various upgrades I have planned for the game. And finally movement. First sprinting, and then a horse system, including a panic mechanic similar to Witcher 3 and calling the horse. And that was day 102 of making my game. Today I implemented a crucial feature for the future of the game, which is combo counter. Whenever the player hits an enemy or counters an attack, it adds +1 to the counter. And if he doesn't follow up with another attack or a counter in 5 seconds, or gets hit himself, it resets to 0. It's gonna be crucial for the next feature I plan to add after it, which are executions. And that was day 103 of making my game. Time to start prepping up the sprites for the executions. So today I prepared the ones for the player. I needed 2 sets of sprites, one for before the executions and one for the after the executions. Overall, the executions are inspired by all-out attacks in Persona 5 Royal, and that was day 104 of making my game. Today I continued preparing the executions, this time with sprites for the enemies and making cuts animation sprites. Why will it look like this and not like normal drone sprites? I wanted to make them look good without adding even more hundreds of sprites I'd need to make later. I think this approach will work, it will look good while having significantly less sprites required. And that was day 105 of making my game. Today I wrapped up the preparations for the execution system. I made all the necessary animations for them. The executions themselves will happen on another layer above the game layer but below the UI layer. That's to not mess with the player's logic too much. And that was day 106 of making my game. Today I added executions into the game. Whenever the combo counter is at least 8, the players can now execute an enemy. That turns on a black overlay and follows up with an animation of player destroying that enemy. It's still a little bugged, but the basis is done and I will fix those bugs in the future days. And that was day 107 of making my game. Time to tune up the executions, which I will be doing for the next couple of days. This time I added something to the combo counter I missed originally. Now when the players swing at the air, it resets too. And because of that, you can't now swing aimlessly. And that was day 108 of making my game. It's time to fix the executions. Today I fixed an error where the enemies got stuck, frozen post an executions. This happened because they were, you could say, stuck between their states. For example, enemy was attacking, execution happened, which makes everything stop for a while, and enemy's brain cells got fried and he didn't know what to do. But today I fixed that, and that was day 109 of making my game. Last adjustment to the executions today. If players killed an enemy that was about to attack with the executions, the attack queue system didn't see that the enemy was dead, so it waited for him to finish the attack, which obviously wouldn't happen like ever. So today I made the attack queue system work with the executions. And that was day 110 of making my game. Today I added health bars to the enemies. Now a small rectangle appears above their heads, showing how much health they have. It makes everything much more readable instantly, and it deletes the feeling that I had that my hits to the enemies weren't actually doing anything. Now there's visual response showing me that they do. And that was day 111 of making my game. Today it's time to start working on another feature, and that's throwing daggers. Today I prepared the necessary sprites for the throwing animations and made the dagger model, which I copied the normal sword for and made it smaller. And that was day 112 of making my game. Today I set up the animations for the throwing daggers. Then I also estimated the coordinates for which they need to fly from. I didn't finish the logic yet, that's to be done tomorrow, and then we'll have another feature ready. And that was day 113 of making my game. Today I implemented throwing daggers. Now the players are able to attack enemies from a distance. The daggers are thrown in the direction the player is facing and will automatically aim at the enemy that is to that direction. And that was day 114 of making my game. Today I added a second variation to the throwing daggers in the game. Now the players can throw up to 3 daggers at once. That's gonna be an upgraded version of the initial throwing skill. One will go straight and 2 of the daggers will go a bit to the sides. And that was day 115 of making my game. Today I added an invulnerability skill to the game. The way it works is pretty simple. Players can now use a skill that makes them immune to all types of damage, even if they get hit. This state lasts for 10 seconds and follows up with a 10-minute cooldown. And that was day 116 of making my game. Today I added a healing skill to the game. Similarly to the executions, it is based on the combo counter. Now the players can choose which to use when they reach a high enough combo. The skill itself gives a small amount of health back at a time and shows a small cross icon to have some visuals too. And that was day 117 of making my game. Today I added healing out of combat. Now when the players are out of combat, their health will slowly climb up 1 HP at a time. It's a way for their health to be restored in between combat rounds. It makes it so they are always fresh when entering new ones, even if the previous one left them barely alive. And that was day 118 of making my game. Today I fixed a weird bug. When adding healing out of combat, I noticed that the basic infantry does the double swing attack I added specifically for the officer's enemy type. It turned out that there was a mistake in the code. Because both basic infantry and the officers inherit the base enemy class, it allowed them both to use that attack animation. But now I fixed it and basic infantry uses only normal swings as initially designed. And that was day 119 of making my game. Gameplay presentation version 0.05. This version has all 4 types of enemies like previously, but with a lot of new skills available to the players. That includes executions, healing, throwing daggers and the invulnerability skill. And this is near the final version of the combat system. It is fast paced, gives couple combat options, and has multiple enemy types. For me it's fun and not too hard, but at the same time not that easy. If you lose focus for a while, you can lose health easily. It's what I was aiming for when I started making the game. Of course there's always room for improvement or tweaks, but it won't be any major overhaul of the system. And that was day 120 of making my game. Today it was time to add something very important that I've put back in time for a while now, and that's to sort out my folders in the Unity editor. With the numbers of sprites and prefabs rapidly growing, it was getting to the point where it was hard to keep track of it. So I spent a while to organize everything and I made subfolders there. While stuff like this may not be as exciting as making combat, it is as important to keep the speed of the game dev satisfactory. And that was day 121 of making my game. Today I want to design the UI, as it is the next thing I want to add. I plan to have a few UI elements there. In the top left I plan to have the health bar and a thin green line showing progress in getting to the next level. Under the health bar there's the combo counter and a sprint bar showing the amount of stamina the players have. Down left we have a small map that you'll be able to turn on and off, and next to it are the cooldown icons showing you which skills are available to use. In the middle of the screen there's a horse panic system. And finally in the top right we have the current mission or objective selected. This may seem like a lot at first, but the amount of elements active at all times is just the health bar, cooldowns and the missions. And that was day 122 of making my game. For the next few days I will be implementing temporary UI elements before adding the proper ones. I started with the health bar and the experience meter using Unity's built-in features. Health bar already shows the proper health amount, but the X is only there for the future since I don't have the leveling system yet. And that was day 123 of making my game. Today I added two more UI elements. Firstly, I added a sprinting meter showing the amount of stamina players have, and then I added some pattern to it to give it some flavor. In the middle I added a meter for the future horse panic system I plan to add. Similarly to health and experience, they are generated within Unity itself. For now they're just there to exist, but it will make things easier when it comes the time to make them work properly. And that was day 124 of making my game. Today I added a placeholder map and the cooldown icons. The map will display the areas player is close to currently, and you can choose to have it displayed or hide it to the left of the screen. The cooldown icons show which skills are currently usable and which are recharging with a circle animation. There's only one UI element left to add, and that was day 125 of making my game. Today I added a mission UI. It has the text field for the name of the quest and another one for the current objective. I added a temporary placeholder for the icon that will be showing the type of the quest that is selected. So for example, main quest, side quest or artifact searching, anything will be shown by that icon. No logic behind it yet, but it will make things easier in the future when I will add that logic, because the UI elements are already waiting. And that was day 126 of making my game. Today I made sprites for the health bar and the attack cooldowns. In both cases it was a bit of back and forth, as you can probably see in the recordings, because I had rough ideas of what I want, but I needed to get these ideas to look good. I added an eagle on top of the health bar to add some flavor to it, and the cooldown icons came out quite nice too in my opinion. And that was day 127 of making my game. Today I added the UI sprites I made yesterday into Unity. It may seem like a simple switch, and it was, but only for the health bar. There it was only a matter of adding the health bar and adjusting both it and the experience meter so their location and sizes look okay. But for the cooldown elements I have to rewrite logic a bit to use my prefab icons I made instead of generating them in Unity. But I think it came out quite nice. And that was... This might completely change how my game plays. Day 128 of making my game. Today it's time to design the skill tree and its skills to unlock. I divided it into 6 branches, each of them need the previous skill to unlock the next one. Each branch has either 3 or 2 skills in it. The 6 branches are throwing daggers, health, armor, executions, healing and invulnerability. I will go over what the skills themselves exactly do when I make them work in Unity itself. For now, that was My game finally has a progression system. Day 129 of making my game. Today I added the basic logic for leveling. That means the players are getting experience points for killing enemies. For now it is only visible in the editor, but the backbone logic for the whole system is in place. And that was... Now it finally feels like a game. Day 130 of making my game. Today I updated the experience UI bar to show the progress in leveling. I also added a new TextMash Pro object to the canvas to display the current level players are on above it. Next up will be the skill tree in Unity itself. And that was... You can now upgrade your character in my game. Day 131 of making my game. It's finally time to implement the skill tree UI. Using the logic I prepared previously, I made a skill tree UI where players can spend points. I gave myself a couple of skill points you normally get for the next level in the editor to show how it works. For now it's only using placeholders, which I will later switch for my sprites, but the logic for the UI is there. And that was... I had to make 15 icons for my game. Day 132 of making my game. Today I painted the sprites for the icons I will use in the skill tree UI. I needed 15 icons for all the skills. I used the cooldown icons I made previously because they fit here too, but the style in the skill tree is a bit different. I decided to have a blue gradient background with the icons themselves being white. It is minimalistic, but I think it came out pretty good. And that was... This small change made a huge difference. Day 133 of making my game. Today I switched the placeholders with my images. Now it already looks much better. Also I made changes to the logic to make the icons work and display them in the panel where the currently selected skill should be displayed, and its description and everything with it. Now it displays the icon there too, and that was... You couldn't even do this before! Day 134 of making my game. Now it's time to hook up the skill from the skill tree into my actual scripts. Firstly I hooked up the throwing dagger skill. Now the unlock of the skill is needed to throw daggers at all. The next skill lowers the cooldown for the throws, and the last skill unlocks the ability to throw 3 daggers at once. And that was... I made myself harder to kill. Day 135 of making my game. Today I hooked up the health upgrades from my skill tree to the player health script. Now on top of the default 250 HP, the players can get up to 3 health upgrades that each give plus 25 more health points, making it easier to stay alive. And that was... Now enemies deal way less damage. Day 136 of making my game. Continuing where I left off with the health skills, today I made the skill tree work with the armor skills. Now the players can get up to 30% less damage if they have the 2 armor skills unlocked. Both of the skills allow the players to take 15% less damage, and that was... This made executions way easier. Day 137 of making my game. Executions are the next feature I needed to tweak to work with the skill tree. Now the first skill unlocking the executions is necessary. The second, the third skills lower the needed combo counter for the players to use the executions from the basic 10 to 8 and then to 6, making it easier to use it. And that was... Now I can heal mid-fight! Day 138 of making my game. Today I made the next skill work using the skill tree. It's the second to last, the healing skill. Similarly to the executions, the first skill unlocks the ability to even use it. By default the healing adds plus 10 health points back, but it can be raised by another 10 health points if the second skill is unlocked as well. And that was... This might be the most overpowered ability. Day 139 of making my game. Last skill was left to hook up with the skill tree, and that was the invulnerability skill. Using it, the players can turn immune to all type of damage for 10 seconds. The first skill unlocks the ability at all, the second one lowers the cooldown. By default it is pretty long, lasting 8 whole minutes, but it can be lowered to only 4 minutes, which is pretty low for such an OP ability. And that was... My game was lying to the player. Day 140 of making my game. Today a very important tweak to the cooldown icons and the combo counter. With the changes associated with the skill tree, they stopped working perfectly. That's because they were made to work on the basic numbers I gave the skills as defaults. But if you lowered the cooldown by example, the cooldown still displayed the normal length even if it was available faster. Today I fixed it all and now it's fully compatible with the skill tree. And that was... I fixed something that made the progression boring. Day 141 of making my game. A small tweak to the experience points. Right now I set it up that all the enemy types give the same amount of XP when killed, which was 1 point per kill. But that's not fair, I think, so I switched the XP based on the enemy type. If it's basic infantry, it's still only 1 point. If it's officers or musketeers, it's 3 points. And for the enemy with the most health, the heavy infantry, it's 4 points you get now. And that was... This doesn't change gameplay, but it feels way better. Day 142 of making my game. Today I decided to upgrade the combo counter UI text element to look better. Before it was very basic and ugly. The free font I found is great, but the plain color was so boring. So I looked through the Unity's options and ultimately I was left with something that you can see on the screen. I am pretty content with it. And that was... I found a bug that was ruining my combat. Day 143 of making my game. Today a tiny bug fix. While doing the testing for the previous episode, I noticed that during the executions the counter tends to reset right after it, even though I don't get hit or anything. I instantly had a hypothesis why it happens, and that's because the combat ends for the next hit for 5 seconds before resetting the counter, and during the 5-second rule the execution is happening and players can't get the next hit. Now I fixed it and the 5-second rule doesn't happen while the execution is happening, and that was... Movement in my game was too slow. Day 144 of making my game. Today I added a new mechanic to the game, and that's sprinting. Now when players press the shift key, they move faster. It's the first thing I planned from the new mini phase that is the movement expansion. And that was... Now movement actually has a cost. Day 145 of making my game. Today I added stamina to the player. And then right away I hooked up both sprinting and dashing to the stamina. And at the end I connected it all to the UI stamina element. Now the movement takes stamina down. And that was... You can't just spam movement anymore. Day 146 of making my game. A small adjustment to the stamina. Previously the stamina logic was purely visual and held nothing behind it. Now I made it that when it's 0, the players can't dash or sprint until it regenerates. With this I finished the easiest part in movement expansion. And the next part is adding horse to the game, which I think will be way harder than the previous things. And that was... I had to draw a horse and I had no idea how. The 147 of making my game. Time to paint the horse placeholder sprites. With the player and the enemy sprites I was using my Blender model as reference. Here I can't do that because I have no horse model and I didn't want to waste time making one, so I found free to use model online, which I will link in the comments, and used it to make the placeholder sprites. And that was... I brought my horse into my game. The 148 of making my game. Today I created the horse object in Unity, gave it all the needed components and made all animations it needs to work. I wondered where I should put the pivot on it, since the humans have it on their hips, and ultimately I decided the best place would be the belly of the horse. And that was... My game finally has a horse. Day 149 of making my game. After writing all the logic for the horse today, I can say we have the basic horse done. For now it only stands around and rarely it moves a bit, but it is a start. It's the easiest part, and implementing mounting and make it work with all the other systems will be the real challenge here. But that's something to worry about for the future Martha. And that was... This decision completely changed how writing works. Day 150 of making my game. Back to painting placeholder sprites, as I made the necessary mounted player sprites. Initially I was planning to have the player mounted sprites and the horse sprites work separately, but ultimately I decided that the horse will have both the player and the horse painted on it, while the player will be a tiny 5x5 pixel box while he's riding the horse for technical reasons. And that was... You can finally ride the horse! Day 151 of making my game. After today it's finally possible to ride the horse in the game. With the F key you can now mount and dismount the horse. It's faster than going by foot, and my plan is to have the horse for only moving fast around the map. And that was... Your horse can panic and throw you off. Day 152 of making my game. Today I updated the panic UI meter I implemented a while ago. The original panic meter was merely a placeholder. I added an image over it and made it so it works properly. Now when the enemies approach the horse while the player is on it, the horse panic meter starts to go up, and if it fills up fully, the player gets yanked off. And that was... My horse now has a mind of its own. Day 153 of making my game. A tiny adjustment to the horse behavior today. Up until now the horse chilled when not doing anything. I made it so that it doesn't avoid enemies in combat. Now it flees from the enemies even if the player is not riding it, and I think it makes it feel way more natural. And that was... You can call your horse from anywhere. Day 154 of making my game. Today I made it so you can call the horse to yourself. To show this I placed the horse really far from the scene. But with just one click you can make him run up to you, just like if he was Roach from Witcher 3. And that was... Opponents were completely breaking riding the horse. Day 155 of making my game. Today I made a crucial change to the enemy's behavior. Before this change, they would attack player while he was on the horse. This caused many bugs, with the worst one being that the player could counter the attacks and mess up his animations. I fixed it, and now they wait for the player to dismount. But you can see they still stand in place and it looks very awkward. That's what I aim to improve tomorrow. And that was... Enemies used to just stand there. Day 156 of making my game. Today I improved the idle behavior of the enemies while the player is mounting the horse. Yesterday they were just standing around doing nothing. Now they circle him as if waiting for the moment he gets off ready to strike. This makes it look way better in my personal opinion. And that was... My enemies felt lifeless outside of combat. Day 157 of making my game. Another improvement to the enemy idle behavior. Today out of combat. This one is not very important as players probably won't get to see it much, but I still implemented it to show how their behavior changed when players are outside their detection range. I moved the player far away and spawned a few enemies. They walk around like if they're patrolling the area. And that was... My horse could walk through everything. Day 158 of making my game. Today it's probably the last adjustment to the horse, and that's giving it the ability to collide with the environment. For that purpose I gave it its own sorting layer and a rigid body 2D component. This caused issues with the player, so I had to also rewrite the horse logic to support the rigid body instead of transferring movement. And that was... After over 150 days, phase 1 is done. Day 159 of making my game. With the horse implemented, the last part of the first phase is finished. All the parts I planned, which you can see on the screen, had a goal, and that was to create the core for the game, which I consider achieved. All the phases I have planned will have some sort of end goal in mind. Just like for the second phase, I will start soon. At the end of it, I want a playable beta for testing combat for the public. In tomorrow's episode, I will go over the plans for it in more detail. And that was... Now it's time to turn this into a real game. Day 160 of making my game. Time to plan the second phase. I divided it into 6 parts. Firstly, I will establish the foundation. Since then, I will implement a new centralized control system, so all controls will be customizable in one place. Second part will be focusing on creating the playable scene. That includes adding boundaries and background. Third part is the primitive save system, made only for this beta, having the player's levels and unlock skills saved in it. Next up will be the menus, functional main menu, post system and more. Fifth sub-phase will be the controller support. And lastly will be the art. I put the art as 0.2.6, but in reality I will mix it with other parts, so I don't just do art for months straight without a break. And that was... My game finally has actual scenes. Day 161 of making my game. Today it's time to start the second phase of making my game, where the end goal is having a combat testing game to share with the public. Today I set up the scenes that will be in that version. First is the scene where my logo will play post-launch. Next up will be the main menu I will implement way later, in some future phase. For now it only listens for the space key, and when it is pressed, it opens the proper gameplay scene. And that was... I had to rewrite my entire control system. Day 162 of making my game. A crucial new system to the game was made today, and that's what I called centralized control system. Before today, all controls were scattered across different scripts. Attacking was in player controls, but dagger throwing was in the script responsible for daggers, for example. And it stays that way, but I moved the controls to one script which the other will use instead of having the controls declared in them. This is crucial mainly for the players being able to change their controls to their liking. And that was... I want players to choose how they play. Day 163 of making my game. Today I defined 2 ways to play the game. Maybe you noticed across the videos, but I use the mouse for attacking the enemies because personally I find it more convenient. But everyone is different, so I set up 2 ways of aiming. One uses the mouse like previously, while the other takes the direction player is facing. That's another early feature needed for players to be able to have choice when it comes to controls. And that was... I went back to painting sprites today. Day 164 of making my game. As I said a few days ago, I will mix the sub-phases of phase 2 with painting sprites. Today I finished sprites for players attacking down, but I focused more on getting back to painting sprites as it's been a long time since I've done so. I think I will spend a while painting sprites now, before moving on to the next subphase, after wrapping subphase 2.1 yesterday. And that was... My game needs over 1200 sprites. Day 165 of making my game. Today I counted how many sprites the game will need. Well, at least from the things we have now. That includes the player, all enemy types and the horse. Together they will all need 1295 sprites, and that number can only grow, from which I have made 87 so far. From today on every painting sprites video I will put an update on how many sprites are done and what percentage that is. And here's the bit of the Excel to prove that it's really as much sprites as I said. Also, tomorrow the Steam Summer Sale starts. My first game, University Hell, is gonna be 80% off during it. If you want to support this game I'm making, you can do it by buying it. I'm gonna be mentioning it in the videos until the sale ends. And that was time to finally make the player look better. Day 166 of making my game. Another day of painting sprites. I will do a couple of videos, or even more, of painting sprites in a row now, probably. Today I painted the sprites for the first variant of attacking left. Like I said yesterday, here's the updated sprite count. And also, as I said yesterday, my first game, University Hell, is 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was another day of the Endless Sprite Factory. Day 167 of making my game. Yet another day of painting sprites. Today I tackled the second variant of attacking down. As a reminder, there are 3 variants for player normal attacks in every direction. And again, just like in the previous days, a friendly reminder that my first game, University Hell, is 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was one more attack direction fully completed. Day 168 of making my game. Time to wrap up the down attack sprites. The first attack animation is a thrust attack. After I finish the third attack, we are 3 out of 3 done in that direction. And again, my first game, University Hell, is 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was the sprite grind continues. Day 169 of making my game. Grinding continues, and I mean making sprites, of course. Today I made sprites for attacking left's second variant. Only one is left in that direction. And once again, a friendly reminder that my first game, University Hell, is still 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And it's a way of supporting this new project I'm making, if you want to. And that was I'm slowly becoming a medieval animation machine. Day 170 of making my game. Another day, another sprites making session. Today it's the third and the last variant of attacking left, that being the thrust. Overall, I think that I'm getting the hang of it and it goes a bit more smoothly with each episode. And I'd like to politely remind you again that my first game, University Hell, is 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. I'd love if you gave it a chance. And that was the sprite grind never ends, it only changes directions. Day 171 of making my game. Yet another day of painting sprites is upon us. Today I made all 5 sprites for the first variant of attacking up. Slowly but surely the number of sprites done is growing. Also a reminder that University Hell is 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was this game needs over 1000 sprites, so we keep grinding. Day 172 of making my game. Just like in the last few episodes, we are making sprites again. And it will be what is ahead of us for the future weeks and episodes too. But after a few more episodes, I think I will also start phase 2.2. And I'd like to humbly remind you all that my first game, University Hell, is 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was every sprite done means a bit of my sanity is gone. Day 173 of making my game. I think the biggest challenge of finishing this project won't be making the systems or the story, but rather not going mad from making all these sprites. Only kidding, of course, and aside the painting sprite madness, University Hell is still 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was my hand hurts, but the sprite counter must go up. Day 174 of making my game. I started painting another direction attack. Today it's the down left attack's first variant. I've caught myself recently that I'm running out of ideas what to say in those painting videos. I might have to start talking about everything and nothing just so they're not 10 seconds long each. And by the way, my first game, University Hell, is still 80% off. And that was the sprites are hard enough without me recording the wrong thing too. Day 175 of making my game. I messed up today because I forgot to record me painting the sprites. Or rather, I did record it, but I recorded the wrong window, that being my Huion tablet window. I have no idea how that happened, but aside that, after today the second variant for the down left attack is done. University Cell is still 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was... How many sprites can one human make before going absolutely insane? Day 176 of making my game. After today the last variant for attacking down left is done. That's 4 out of 8 directions we need done. Only upper left and all the right ones are left to be painted from attacks. And if you wanted to try my first game, University Cell, it's still on sale during the Steam Summer Sale for 80% off. And that was another peaceful day in the sprite production facility. Day 177 of making my game. Blah blah blah, I'm painting sprites again. I've been thinking to start talking about random stuff, so there's more interesting stuff in these painting sprites videos than just painting sprites. Starting with the World Cup. Personally, I'm a big football fan and I've been watching a lot of the matches. And I've got a question for you guys. Who will win it in the end? Also, a quick reminder that my first game, University Cell, is still 80% off on Steam. And that was... I just accidentally reduced my workload by like 75%. Day 178 of making my game. I discovered a new method to make the sprite production faster. Each attack has 3 animation variants, with the first and the second one being practically mirrored. First is the swing from left to right, and the second one is the swing from right to left. I was painting them both from scratch, but today I realized I can just copy and make small changes from the first to the second variant. This made it that it took me a quarter of the time it normally takes me to paint one variant. From other news, University Cell is still 80% off during the Steam Summer Sale. And that was... Apparently, recording the correct window is my final boss now. Day 179 of making my game. I can't believe I made the same mistake again, that being recording the wrong window. So sadly, again you only get the end results today. I'll do my best so it won't happen in the future. Also, I'd like to remind you that the Steam Summer Sale is ending and it's the last moment. My first game, University Cell, is 80% off. So if you wanted to give it a try, hurry up. And that was... I engineered the scene layout. Day 180 of making my game. Today it's time to finally start phase 2.2, and that is preparing the scene. Today I want to design how it will look. The scene itself is gonna be divided into 9 rectangles, each being 1920 by 1080 pixels, surrounded by another layer of rectangles, so there's something beyond the boundaries. I'm gonna fill the scene with stuff like trees, rocks, a lake, paths, a well, maybe some house and fences. And that was... Welcome back to how many sprites can one human make before going absolutely insane. Day 181 of making my game. Back to painting sprites. Today I did 2 first variants of upper right attacks. Thanks to the variants being practically mirrored, I can do it much faster and do them both in one episode by copying them. And that was... At this point my life is just Photoshop and suffering. Day 182 of making my game. After today, attack upper right sprites are done. And what's crazy for me is that I'm only 2 more directions away from having all of the attack sprites finished for the main character, which seemed impossible for me when I started painting them a while ago. Also, I think it's going much more smoothly than at first, cause the more I paint, the more natural it comes to me, I think. And that was... Today the world stops being a sketch and starts being real. Day 183 of making my game. A while back I designed the scene for the beta combat version. Today it's time to start working to make it a reality. And that's by painting sprites. I painted everything I planned today, starting from trees, going through rocks and finishing on a house. All that's left is to put it in the Unity scene. And that was... I have entered the Swordman Forever phase of development. Day 184 of making my game. painting right sprites today, variant 1st and 2. And I figured I'd start talking about random stuff to make these painting sprites episodes more interesting. And today, while painting, I started thinking, man, I'd play Skyrim. Which happens at least a couple times a year. What are your games which you always want to come back to? And that was... Making sprites for an indie game is basically controlled insanity. Day 185 of making my game. Wrapped up the right sprites today with the first attack. Yesterday I talked about how I get a feeling to play Skyrim a few times a year. Another game that does have a similar effect on me is The Witcher 3. Every time I hear its soundtrack anywhere, I instantly feel like starting the game. It's almost like a curse. And that was... The scene finally isn't empty. Day 186 of making my game. Today I took all the sprites I made for the scene and placed them there. Firstly I had to make them into prefabs. I gave them all colliders, widget bodies and a script that decides where objects are displayed in front. Then I filled the scene with them. I think it came out pretty good. Maybe the paths could look a little better, but with them I mainly wanted to test if I could make smaller bits of path that I will later combine in the scene itself. Which works, but just needs sprites that fit better together in the future. But for now it's fine for this beta version, I think. And that was... We are once again sacrificing sanity to the sprite gods. Day 187 of making my game. Painting sprites, painting sprites, painting sprites. Lately it seems I don't do anything but painting sprites. Which I guess is kinda true, but there's no other way but to paint more sprites. Today I started the last attack direction, the downward sprites. Tomorrow it'll finally be the last of the attack sprites. And that was... Slowly replacing my mental health with painted sprites. The 188 of making my game. The day where all the attack sprites are done is finally upon us. After countless hours, layers and mental health on the brink of collapsing, all the attack sprites are finished for the main character. And now that I finished celebrating, I can look at the number of sprites that are still left to do and see that I still have over 1,000 to make. But I made the first 200, so the next 1,000 plus will also be made sooner or later. And that was hours of painting, and it all comes down to this moment. Day 189 of making my game. Today's episode is the culmination of all the previous ones where I painted the sprites for hours, and that's because today I replaced the placeholders with the attack sprites I made. And man, I have to say, looking at the results, I think it was worth it. I'm extremely happy with how it came out, and I think it looks great. If someone's wondering what's next for the series, I'd hope to wrap up all the main character sprites by around episode 200 or something. And that was... The enemies finally have somewhere to come from. Day 190 of making my game. A minor but important change to the game. I changed the way the enemies spawn. Previously they spawned in a radius set around the player. After today they spawn in 4 different spawn points I set up in the scene. There is a tiny problem that their detection ranges are too small to see the player, but I'll adjust them in tomorrow's episode. And that was... The enemies finally have their eyesight back. Day 191 of making my game. Yesterday, after I changed the way the enemies spawn, I added that I'll adjust the detection ranges today, and that's what I did. There was however a small issue with it, and I didn't know why my changes in the Unity editor didn't work. But I forgot that if there's something in the code that is called when the enemies are spawned, it will override whatever I put in the editor. After quickly realizing my mistake, I ditched the unnecessary part of the code, and now the enemies can see the player with the new spawn points. And that was... At this point I could properly animate sword attacks in my sleep. Day 192 of making my game. Back to painting sprites. After I finally finished the attack sprites, today I made all the parries the main character needs. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the Discord server. Since I started this series, there has been a few people asking if I have one. I always said that I think I'm too small for it yet, but I wanted to see if there's actual interest for it. That's why if you'd be interested in joining a potential Discord server around this game I'm making, please go and like the pinned comment so I can see if there's any actual interest or if it's like 2 people. I will ask this in a few episodes in a row just so it doesn't land on one that does pretty badly. And that was, I have become one with the brush tool. Day 193 of making my game. Another day, yet more sprites to make. After this day, all the sprites for pre-executions are made. It went fast as it was just repainting normal attack sprites to white. Like yesterday, I'd like to talk about potential Discord server. Shortly, the more detailed version is in yesterday's episode. If you'd be interested in joining a potential Discord server around my game, please go and like the pinned comment so I can see how many people are actually interested in it. And please do so even if you already did it yesterday. And that was... The player can finally die. Day 194 of making my game. Maybe some of you forgot, but I sometimes do other stuff than painting sprites, and today is one of those rare days. Today I implemented players dying, for now only using placeholders. It simply shows the death animation, a new UI element, and after pressing restart, it reloads the scene completely. For the last time, just like in the last 2 episodes, I wanna talk about a Discord server set around the game I'm making. Would you be interested in joining a potential Discord like this? If yes, please go and like the pinned comment and do so even if you liked on the previous episodes. If there will be at least a few people interested, I'll make one. And that was... I've painted so many swords I could open a medieval museum. Day 195 of making my game. With today's episode, I have all the sprites needed for executions for the main character, since I made all post-execution sprites. I forgot to mention yesterday with the dying episode that I decided to reduce the needed sprites count by making every single enemy type and the players only have one death animation instead of one per direction. That reduced the needed sprites count by 135 sprites, which I think is a good week of painting sprites probably. And that was... I think Photoshop knows me better than my family now. Day 196 of making my game. 2 days ago, I made a placeholders version of dying in the game. Now it is time to make it look properly. For that I made the dying sprites needed for the main character. What's left now is putting them in the game itself. And that was... The main character is finally complete. Day 197 of making my game. After replacing the placeholders with the dying sprites I made yesterday, dying is finally implemented and I can say that the player object finally has all the functionalities I have planned at the start of this project. This doesn't mean I can't add anything new, but I am very content with how it is at the moment. And that was today's mission: turn caffeine into attack animations. Day 198 of making my game. Last set of sprites I need for the main character are throwing daggers. It's 24 sprites I need for that set of animations, which I divided into 2 episodes. It feels kind of crazy that I am probably one more painting sprite episode from having all the needed sprites for the main character. It's the last stretch. And that was... My mouse deserves a paid vacation after this. Day 199 of making my game. All of main character's sprites are finally done. What seemed impossible to me a few weeks back is finally done. 287 sprites painted, and all that is left is putting them on the player object in the game tomorrow. After that I can finally do something else besides making main characters sprites. However, there's still over 800 sprites to make, but one by one I'll go through them all. And that was... Weeks of painting finally paid off. Day 200 of making my game. Today I opened Unity and replaced all of the placeholder sprites with the main character sprites I made in the last few days. And I think I can say that it was worth it. The only thing I regret is that it took so long. That was mainly because of my university and the World Cup in July. But today, with still 2-3 months ahead of me, I plan to speed things up and make the most of that time, so when they end, I will be in a much better position. And that was